Yes. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my presentation. And don't mind me as I move the Zoom bar over there about somebody's watching me make presenting on Zoom not so scary. My name is Rachel Eichen. I have some ghosts up ahead and over here. And I just realized I didn't have Vicky do my introduction. I don't know if I get a cool Vicky introduction, but I thought I might request one because she does such great introductions, and I feel so special when you do them.
Oh, okay. Well,
You don't have to, it's fine, but I just thought it'd be
so
fun.
when we started to plan this mini conference, I wanted all of our favorites, not just my favorites, but all of our favorite, because Rachel is special in the instructional design and learning SIG world. She has done a number of presentations for us, and always we get a record number of signups. People really like to see Rachel's presentations and they like to attend Rachel's presentations. Also, selfishly, I just like to watch Rachel present because she has teaching chops that I can only dream of having. So when I emailed Rachel, could you please, she wrote back, sure. And I appreciate that so much. So without further ado, plus, I think teaching Excel, Microsoft Excel on a cruise ship has got to be like the best job ever. So just props to you for having worked that out to be paid to be on a cruise ship.
No,
Good job.
the secret is the money's not that great, but yes, I did receive monetary compensation for that, amazingly. So
Well, forever and ever you can tell people I taught Excel, Microsoft
that's it.
Excel
That's
cruise ship.
right. That's right. Cool.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Vicky. I just wanted the ego boost, but thank you, Vicky. I appreciate you introducing me. So my topic today is somebody's watching me make presenting on Zoom not so scary. So I've done several I've done several, I've done more than several, I've done a lot of Zoom presentations. And so I kind of want to share with you tips and tricks along the way of what I've learned. So we're going to go forward here and my fun animations. So our spooky agenda today, we're going to do some tips and tricks. It's going to be more of a discussion. So I don't want to just sit here and lecture and I have talking points, but I also want to know where everybody is coming from and what everybody wants to learn because Zoom is such a vast topic. So there's so much you can learn about Zoom and there's so many things you can ask. And I didn't know if there was certain things that you want to know more. And it doesn't have to be just Zoom. It can be any online presentation tool, although I feel like Zoom definitely has the market cornered with that sort of thing. I'm not going to focus too much on slide design. We do have another presenter talking about presentations, so I didn't want to overlap too much. I'll talk a little bit about it, but I really want to talk more about the mechanics of presenting on Zoom and the strategies and less about only have this many bullets, only have this many things, that sort of thing. So I don't want to talk too much about that. Happy to answer questions if you want to, but that wasn't originally part of it. But I will have some hot takes. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with that word, but hot takes are also known as controversial opinions. So I have many controversial opinions, but I'm just sharing a few today, and we'll see how that goes. But with everything that I don't know how many uh, presentations you've attended about speaking or about presentations or about design, remember that take what's good, leave what's not. So I might say something to you, and you might say, I don't agree with that at all, and that's fine, But this is just my personal experience, what has worked well. All right. So moving on, a little bit about me. Vicki gave me a great introduction. A little bit about me, though, and I know I met some of you earlier at the very start of the conference. I've been presenting for about 14-ish years, depending on where we start our presentation timeline, but mostly software is what I've been presenting on. And I have done in-person and remote training. I will say that more of my experience is in person, so there's certain things you have to give up when you present remotely, and so that's always been a challenge for me because there's certain things you have to adjust for. So I definitely have the in-person. I have more recent remote experience, but I've done lots of different industries too. So Vicki did mention I did work on a cruise ship. Yes, I taught Excel classes. Yes, I taught Photoshop classes. People paid for these classes, believe it or not. And it was mostly the passengers, very rarely crew. And if you say to yourself, well, why would anyone pay for computer classes on a cruise ship? I want to tell you, these were longer cruises with lots of sea days. So if you've ever been on a cruise with a lot of sea days, eventually you get kind of bored and restless. And so that was what I did. I also worked in hospitals. I've worked in casinos. That's why there's that picture of me at the bottom there, standing in front of slot machines. I do live just outside of Las Vegas. So lots of different industries that I've worked in. The majority of the industries that I worked in, I had no prior knowledge. So I had to kind of start from the bottom and pretend like I know what I'm talking about. So my latest venture is working in supply chain management. So I've learned all about supply chain management, and I didn't know an indirect cost from a direct cost before I started. So that's been a learning experience. But enough about me. I want to know, what about you? So I'm going to go ahead and launch my very first poll. So give me 1 second while I do that, because there's so many options. But here we go. I'm going to launch my first poll. And I want to know, what is your current experience presenting online? Doesn't have to be Zoom. It can be anything, any software, just specifically online though. And I'll give you a little bit of time to Whoa. Okay. Well, looks like we have all the results in from people. So I'm going to go ahead and share these results. These results are actually kind of, they're either super exciting or super boring, depending on how you look at it. But everybody said that they had some experience, but nobody said, so no one said never, and no one said a lot. So that's interesting. So I'm curious now in the chat, if you feel, or if you verbally, if you want, whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm just curious if you can give me a little bit more context about, I guess I should have broken out the sums a little bit longer, but like generally, what kind of experience you have presenting online? Because I don't want to, I'll give people a second to do that in the chat. And if not, I'll see you in a second here. I'll just give people a chance to type. But thank you everybody for your quick poll responses. I appreciate that too. Okay, I see. So someone said they presented webinars for SIGs. Cool. All right. So webinar workshop for the tech editing SIG, and they presented the same webinar at Summit 2020. I also presented at Summit 2020. That was the infamous, I was so excited to go to Seattle, and then everything collapsed and COVID happened. So that became a virtual conference. Somebody else said they gave a 40-ish minute presentation on social media to potential clients. That's awesome. I have also done social media training. One of my other industries I work in is libraries. So I've done social media training for libraries. And then somebody else said the earliest remote presenting was via phone, training new customers for software setup. So only on the phone. That is really impressive. That takes a certain amount of patience. If I'm reading that correctly, and you only had the telephone, you had no visual aids, props to you, Marcia. That is awesome. That is a level of patience I am very impressed by. So now it must be a marvel we have Zoom and all these things to present about. Pre-internet, yes, that is a special kind of that takes a special person. So yes, the progress is really awesome. And I know for IT help desk, it's a great, they don't have to troubleshoot everything in the phone anymore. It's great. So awesome. Thank you very much for everybody for sharing. So I went back. I didn't mean to go back. That's okay. All right. So and then somebody else said they present monthly to groups of 20 up to 100. Wow, that is a lot. And that actually leads me to my next point. But they said they do status review presentations mainly. Cool, awesome, that's great. So I call this presentation Zoom because Zoom is the ubiquitous, the big contender. Another online presentation tool that you may encounter at work or in your professional career is Teams. And in my experience, in my opinion, Zoom is better. So if you have a choice, I would opt for Zoom, but sometimes you don't have a choice, especially in the corporate world. So who was it? Melanie that said that she presents to up to 100. I found that at about the 100 mark, Teams doesn't really like all those people. So if you're doing a status call, Teams is fine. If you're doing a small group presentation, Teams is fine. But when you start to get into the more higher amounts, it's a lot harder. So I personally I'm not a fan of Teams as much, but I understand sometimes you don't get a choice. And I see somebody else that they presented through Zoom. Zoom's usually de facto. And I think I even asked Vicki when we were first signing up, I was like, Vicki, what software are we using? Because I like to be prepared, because if it was Teams or Adobe Connect, I don't know if anyone's ever attended any, I know some of the other learning groups outside of STC use Adobe Connect. So it's one of those things I like to know before I go to be prepared because every software is different. I've also used WebEx. If anyone remembers WebEx, unfortunately, they've lost the market share because they're slow and clunky, but I've used WebEx as well. But yes, Teams is better, but a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today apply to most of the software. I try not to just exclusively do Zoom, even though it is the market leader, if you will. So I kind of want to tie this into a little anecdote or factoid. I like to think of remote presenting like a buffet. So I live in Vegas. There's lots of buffets. There were more before COVID. There's less now. But the thing about a buffet is there's all sorts of different things at a buffet. And so this is actually a screenshot from the Bacchanal buffet at Caesars, probably one of my favorite buffets, also probably one of the most expensive. But we have oysters, we have lamb chops, we have sushi, we have a cheese board, we have prime rib, we have some, I think that's either crawfish or lobster up in the corner there. We've got all sorts of different things at this buffet. So we've got a lot of choices. But the problem is when you're presenting online, you, my friend, whether you like it or not, you're the salad bar. You're the thing that people should be listening to and they should be going to. And it probably would be best just to stay in that little salad bar box. But there's so many temptations. And so I mentioned before, I've done in-person presentations, and the one problem with remote is you don't know when they're paying attention. And there's only so much you can do because you're just on this little screen and there's so many things that they can be distracted. There's their phone, there's their email, there's all these things that are going through their job. And we could even make the argument, are we really meant to sit and watch a presentation for an hour just sitting still? You know, we have a hard enough time doing that. So I want you to remember, first of all, you can do your best, but not everybody's going to be paying attention to you. Like right now, there are some of you, I'm talking, you're not paying attention. You're here and I appreciate it, but you're multitasking. I get it. I feel you. So not everyone's going to be paying 100% attention. So I want you to remember that about your presentation. That doesn't make you a bad presenter. It's just the nature of remote presenting. But there's a nice little thing that you can do. And so that's why when you're presenting on Zoom, engagement is really important. And so going back to my salad bar example, let's say I'm going to give you two scenarios. The first scenario, so everybody on this call, by the way, this is a fake scenario. I just want to let everybody know. the first scenario, everybody on this call today is going to get a free pass to that awesome buffet that I showed earlier. Everybody gets a free pass. But the requirement is that you have to go to the salad bar. Or sorry, you can only go to the salad bar. That's the requirement. You can only go to the salad bar. But I'm not going to be there. I'm just going to give you your buffet ticket. You're just going to go in. I'm not going to watch you. I'm not going to see you. So, so some of you will just go to the salad bar and avoid all the temptations. And I applaud you and thank you for that. It's very nice of you. But there are some of you that will say, well, she's not here. How is she going to know we're not going to the salad bar? I want to go have some sushi. I want to go have some bone marrow. I want to go have a, bunch of ice cream. So that's one scenario. But now the second scenario, everybody in the call gets a free buffet pass. I say only go to the salad bar. But then I ask you, well, what was your favorite item at the salad bar? And when you come back, I'm still not going to be here, but I want you to come back from the buffet when you're done and tell me what your favorite item was at the salad bar. So now you still might go visit the other food station because I'm not there because I'm not watching. But at least now I've gotten you to at least check out the salad bar, at least look at the salad bar. So once again, I have to manage my expectations. I can't expect everybody to pay attention fully 100% of the time. It's great if they do. And I know there's some people that sit there and pay full attention, and that is amazing and that is awesome. But I know there's some people that are going to be scattered around. Their attention's going to be scattered around. So I try to think of, and that's why I think engagement is so important, asking questions, engaging the audience, having poll questions, watching the chat, that sort of thing, trying to do your best to engage people so that you can bring them back as much as you can, rein them back as much. And then I like to say engagement is important. Like Halloween candy, you got to mix it up. So that's why I have this bowl of Halloween candy here, and there's different candy in the bowl, right? So if all we got at Halloween every year was just Starburst and that was it, I mean, there's some of you that love Starburst, so that you'd be very happy, but it's the variety that keeps us coming back. It's the Reese's, it's the Kit Kat, it's the Hershey's, it's the Crunch, it's all those things. It's not just the starburst. So that's why it's good to mix it up. All right, so I'm going to take a second. And by the way, if you have any questions, you're welcome to come off mute or you're welcome to put them in the chat. Otherwise, I will just keep on talking. But I have questions too. I always have questions for people. So no shortage of questions here. So speaking of the chat, it's a good idea to watch the chat, but I want you to be smart about it. So what do I mean by that? So when you watch the chat, and this presentation is very manageable. There's only a few people and it's not too bad. But for the person that said they present for groups of 100, right? Sometimes there's a lot of people, a lot of chatting going on. And so what I like to do, my personal strategy, is I like to keep the chat open at all times. And I like to see when things come in and read them out. So I read them aloud and then answer them accordingly. But there are some of you that don't do well because you'll see the chat and you'll get distracted and then it'll throw you off. So you don't have to keep the chat open all the time. I do it because I'm a quick reader and also I like to know when somebody's having a question. But the struggle for me and what I've had to work on is I want to at least finish my thought. So if I'm talking about something and I see something in the chat, I want to make a point to finish my thought at least and then address what is there. But me personally, I like to have the chat open at all times because when I'm talking, I do a lot of software presentations. So if somebody can't get into something, I want to know immediately so I can stop what I'm doing and troubleshoot why they can't get in. If something's wrong with my mic, I want to be able to sometimes say, I can't hear you, or you're muffled, or you're on mute. I want to do that. So I want to address those things. But once again, you don't have to. You can also just take breaks and look at the chat. But I do want to remind you, when it comes to Zoom, you can pull up the chat and have it there permanently. So it doesn't have to. So it's up to you. That's kind of a strategy. And I'm going to ask a question, but I will tell you first that depending on what version of Zoom you are, you might see this. I think they've rolled out mostly the new versions, but in the chat, and I think this is the new version, so I'm just going to go ahead and do an emoji to the last comment that I got. And I saw somebody else did an emoji too. You do have the ability to respond to comments now. This is actually relatively new in Zoom, which makes managing the chat a lot easier if people have side conversations. It can be good and bad, but you can also do emojis. I have mixed feelings about emojis. I think they could be good or bad, but yeah, so you do have the ability to do chats and replies. I'm just going to say, I hope I say your name right. I'm sorry. Edel, did I say that right? Is it Edel? If I said it wrong, I'm sorry, but I'm going to do a little response there so that they can see my response there. Have people, so in your experience, when you're using Zoom, do you use the replies? Do you use the emojis? What have you seen, especially? I'm just curious. I'll give people a second to type in the chat and also play around with the emojis if you'd like to. But I just wanted to see you do for work. All right, awesome. I'm gonna give Alex an emoji here. Thumbs up. Thumbs up's always a safe emoji to give, right? There's that. Well, okay. You know what? But back up. In America, thumbs up for a safe emoji to give. Other countries. It's not always a safe emoji to give, but as far as like not hurting feelings. So for instance, if I were to give, I'm going to give Melissa a confused emoji. And now, am I confused about her statement? Am I just picking that because it had a monocle in it? Why did I pick that emoji? So sometimes there's too many emojis. But I see someone said the emojis are new to them, which is great. And then the nice thing about replying is that you can reply to other people. So this can help manage side conversations, things like that. But it also means that people can have more conversations. So anyway, with the chat, I try my best to watch it when I can. But if it's a large group and if it's like going really fast, sometimes I just put it away. If it's too much, just put it away, come back to it. Now, ideally, you would have a moderator and the moderator would be watching the chat and they would read the questions so you don't have to do any of that. And that's fantastic if you can get a moderator. But I cannot, I'm a one-woman show a lot of the time, so I usually have to manage a lot of my classes, so I'm just used to that. And then I see someone said they didn't know about the replies to the comments. So yeah, that's great. So a lot of people don't know because it's a relatively new feature and it's not super easy. So you could respond, and what I like too is you used to have to like direct message someone, and then if you direct message them, you didn't realize you were only talking to them, and then you'd accidentally want to say something in the whole chat, and you wouldn't do that. So that solves a lot of problems. I really appreciate the reply feature, but I'm going to also say hi, Melissa, so she can see my response. Cool. Awesome. So we had some fun playing with the chat there. That's awesome. So moving on, we also want to talk about sharing your screen. And so here's a little tip about, a few tips about sharing your screen. So first, when you share your screen, you can either choose to share the full screen or you can choose to share individual windows. Okay. You can also share via iPhone if you want to. This has become significantly easier than it used to be. This is one of my favorite features of Zoom because I used to train in hospitals and I would train on an iPhone app and I had to have this cord plugging into a TV and then you can't move very far because the cord's plugged into the TV. It was a nightmare. But the sharing's gotten a lot better. So you can share your whole desktop, which is a good idea if you're opening up a bunch of things. You can share an individual window. So today, right now, I'm sharing just one window. So if an email comes or if a text message comes or some notification, you won't see it. You're only going to see what's in that window. When you're sharing a video, don't forget to share the sound. So there's a share sound feature right here. And I'm trying to wish the arrow would point the other way. That's okay. You could share the sound feature. You can also choose whether or not you want to optimize it for a video clip. So that's up to you. If you're not sharing a lot of video, you don't have to do it. It just means your video is going to be a little choppier. But it's up to you. Don't forget to share your sound though, because some people forget that even though they can hear the sound, that the other person can't. So that's why you always want to share your sound. And so I have another little tip for you, a little advanced tip about sharing your screen. And so this is my little trick that I use. So let me go forward here. Oh, no, other way, wrong way. There we go. So you don't have to share your whole screen. And here's what I mean by this. So I told you that you can share your screen, you can share an individual application, but let's say I want to share PowerPoint in this example, and I want to share Word, but I don't want to share my Outlook and I don't want to share my Teams. You actually have the ability to hold down control. See how there's a control right here. You can hold down control and you can share as many windows as you want, but you can limit some. And so I really like this feature because when I'm doing software training, I'm going back and forth between my PowerPoint and my application, my PowerPoint and my application. And I don't want to accidentally open up my Outlook and expose everybody to my email. So this is great because if I do accidentally open up my Outlook because I forget that I'm sharing my screen, they're just going to see black. So actually what I do is I share my PowerPoint. I put it in presentation mode. I share my PowerPoint and you can choose whether you share your speaker notes or not. Most of us probably don't want to share our speaker notes, so you can turn those off. So if you accidentally pull up your speaker notes, it's okay. No one's going to see them. But that control is your best friend. So you can just select a couple of windows and then you can hit share. Now, the only downside to that is that if I'm doing something in a browser and it opens up a brand new window, then it won't show that to the audience. So just keep that in mind, little quirk. But otherwise, I'm a big fan of that because it hides my taskbar, it hides my notifications. So if I get any I actually have notifications turned off, but if I get any Teams notifications or anything, it's going to hide those. I don't have to accidentally worry about sharing something that I don't mean to, because I'm sometimes too fast to fingers and share that. So that's my little tip for you, that you don't have to share your whole screen.
And I did not know that. Thank you, Rachel.
It's not super obvious. I would show you in Zoom, but I can't because you can't screen share Zoom. So you have to use my pretend. By the way, I didn't know if any of you were keen observers. This is actually a Mac screenshot. So I'm not on a Mac. I got this from, but I was like, oh, we'll see if anybody notices. It's actually a Mac screenshot because it says desktop 1 and desktop 2. It does not say screen 1 and screen 2. And then also on a Mac, you can share your phone via a cable, which is very cool because of course Apple would play nice with its other products. So that's your little tip. All right, so I also wanted to give a little word about sharing. And I hope some of you appreciate my pun because it's Microsoft Word, a program we are all familiar with. So I wanted to use this as an example of when you are sharing software. I know not everybody, when they present, specifically does software sharing, but I want to give you a little bit of guidance about that because I see this a lot. I'm not saying you do it, but I see this a lot. When you're talking about software, make sure that you go slower and you say where you are going, because people forget that when they share software. So let me give you an example of what I see first. So I'm going to be another presenter for a second. I'm going to tell you how to do a screen clipping in Microsoft Word, okay? So first you're going to go to Insert, and then you're going to go to Screenshot, and then you're going to go to Screen Clipping. And that's how you do a screen clipping in Microsoft Word. All right, and see. So that's one way that I see that. So what I recommend instead, I know it's a little harder to train yourself to do, but I like to say, all right, first, you want to go to the top of the screen in the ribbon, and we're going to click the insert. Then we're going to go to the middle of the screen, and we're going to click screenshot with the camera icon here. And then once that opens, you're going to see a list of available windows that we can pick from. And then at the very bottom, you're going to see the option for a screen clipping. And that would be the end. So you can see the second one took a little bit longer, but I gave them time to follow along. I also, and I could even have done that even slower, but I was just trying to give you the gist of it. So always go a little slower, say where you're clicking before you click it, because you know where the insert button is because you've gone to it a bunch of times, but they don't. So if you, anytime you move your mouse, say, hey, in the upper left corner, so then it's not so jarring when I'm moving up here. So try to get in the habit. I know it's a little harder, but like I said, just go slower, keep in mind that they don't know exactly what you are doing at the same time. So that's my little tip about that. And then I always like to,
I would say
go ahead.
preach.
Oh, thank you.
Preach.
And I always like,
yeah.
I always like to pause too. And the thing is, there's some people that'll follow along quickly. They're very quick. They're very snappy. They don't need the slowness, but there are some people that do need the slowness. And that's one thing I miss about in-person training. I can see everybody's screen, so I can see who's on task and who's having slower moments, so I can kind of adjust. So if I'm teaching like a room of people all under the age of 30, I'm fairly confident that they'll be able to follow quicker. But typically speaking, I like to go slow, and the fast people can get it, and the slow people don't have to say, hey, can you slow down? I have a problem? And that's the other thing too. I want to remind you that not everyone's going to speak up when they're having a problem. So don't just say, hey, is everybody still with me? Hey, is anyone having any trouble? Because they don't want to. So just assume that there's people always having trouble, but they don't want to say anything. And that'll help. But there are times people will speak up and say, hey, I don't know where you are. I'm confused. And if they can't access something, usually they will speak up. But don't always assume that people are going to say, hey, can you slow down? Hey, can you go over that again? That sort of thing. And that's why it's also important to ask questions, to test their knowledge, to give them a chance to use what you just talked about. So for instance, if I'm showing a screen clipping, and then later on in the presentation, I would come back and say, okay, which option on the ribbon would I click on to go to the screen clipping? And then of course the answer would be insert, which is given up here. So it's always so good to build tests, build like little questions in between so that people can test their knowledge. But I'm also a fan of making the questions very easy. Some people like to make them super hard. I'm a fan of easy questions because I like easy wins. I like to give people a sense of confidence. All right, so with that said, and I'm learning to go the right way here. All right, so I think I've talked enough. Let's go for another poll. So I'm going to launch my second poll here. And I'm going to say true or false. As the presenter, you must always have your camera on. We'll see if everybody answers the same here. This will be a topic for discussion. All right, so I think most people have answered. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to end the poll. And I'm so happy that the number one answer was the answer that I put in, which was it depends. I'm definitely an it depends person. I don't like to commit to a black or white. I like to do it depends. And so with that said, my first hot take that I promised you there'd be hot takes. My hot take number one, sometimes it's okay not to have your camera on. Now, generally speaking, you should probably have your camera on, generally speaking, but there's sometimes it's not. So instead of me telling you why you shouldn't have your camera on, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to turn to the chat, what What are reasons you might think that you might not want to have your camera on, or you might choose not to have your camera on? Give you a second to type it in the chat there. Let's see, asking some knowledge questions here. All right, we got an answer there. Oh, somebody said 32. I think that there was responding to something else. Okay, location or background, yeah. So maybe you don't want to share your location or background. For presence, yeah, right. For no camera if it will be distracting, that's a good one. Focus on the presentation, distracting, very much so, yeah. So these are all great answers. So some reasons that I choose not to share my camera. When I'm training software, it is very distracting because y'all want you to look at the screen. I don't want you to look at me. I'm very animated, as you can tell. I'm dancing a bunch and moving around, and I don't need people to be distracted by me moving around. So that is one reason. So what I do when I train software, I sign on, I show my camera, I say, hey, I'm a real person. Here's what I look like. And then when it comes time for the demonstration, I turn it off. And the other reason, here's a little trick you can write down for those of you that don't like to put your cameras on and you want a really good reason not to. In the recording, if you leave your camera on, it's going to have your face in the corner of the screen for the recording. But if your camera's off, you can see the full screen in the recording. So sometimes if I'm saying go to the upper right and click this button, my face is going to be blocking it. So I can't turn my camera on. I don't want to block that view. So I turn it off. So that's your little get out of jail free card. If someone says, hey, you should put your camera on, you'd be like, no, I don't want to block the recording. Somebody else said limited internet connection. That's also very true. Sometimes if I have internet issues, I will turn my camera off, and because it uses bandwidth, right? It uses a lot of bandwidth. So that's a good one. Also, sometimes it just makes you feel more comfortable. Sometimes you just feel more comfortable not having a camera on. I know I have, I have my office isn't the most Zoom friendly. It's not got plants and fun stuff around. So sometimes, actually, usually I blur my background. But I will show you, if I blur my background, you don't see my cute little ghost. So, I wanted you to see my ghost. So I have to like put my hands over there, but I can't present all like this. So that wouldn't work. So normally I blur my background. But you guys are special today. You get to see my desk so you can see my little ghost up here. But yeah, great questions. Great suggestion. So that you don't always have to have your camera on, but if you choose not to have your camera on, you have to have another visual medium. So it's a PowerPoint, it's a software demonstration, it's a video, something. You have to have something else for them to look at because nobody wants to look at a black screen with a name on it. That is asking a lot of people to pay attention to. So so if it's just you talking, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to put your camera on unless you have another visual aid. All right, so true or false, one more poll because I want to know about you. And I lost my poll thing. Here it is. So poll question number 3, true or false, the best way to measure engagement is if your participants have their camera on. Is that true or is that false? And I didn't give you an it depends. I'm sorry. I'm forcing you to commit this time. All right, so pretty much everybody has answered. So I'm gonna go end my poll. I'm gonna share my result even though you all got it. It's false. So I want my second hot take, which a lot of people will challenge with, is it's okay if they don't have their cameras on. It doesn't. Now, first of all, for those of you that did turn your cameras on, I really appreciate it because it's more fun to look at people than to look at black boxes. I have looked at just black boxes, so I'm used to it, but I appreciate the people that put their cameras on. But I know there's some of you that are listening to me that don't have your camera on, and that's fine. That doesn't mean you're not there, you're not paying attention. And guess what? You can have your camera on and you can also be multitasking. That doesn't mean anything. So notice how I didn't say, okay, everybody needs to have their camera on. I wanna see everyone's faces. So it's okay if they don't have their cameras on. And don't think just because they don't that they're not paying attention. And don't think just because they do, they are paying attention. Because they could be, I can just be looking at the screen and checking my email and checking Facebook and playing Candy Crush. So I can do all sorts of things with my camera being on. All right. So another tip, and this is my tip, is don't be scared, rehearse. If you're like me, we talked earlier how I'm scared of a lot of things. And the one thing that helps calm my nerves is just knowing as much as I can before I go into something. And so Vicki, I rehearsed with Vicki yesterday. We practiced with poll questions. We did screen test sharings, I always like to rehearse just to make sure things go as smoothly as possible. I recommend that you rehearse, preferably with others, but alone is okay. But here's the caveat. You always have to record. Make sure you record when you present alone. If you present with others, that's fine. You don't have to record. But if you are alone, make sure you hit that record button. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, I don't like the sound of my voice. I don't want to hear myself. I don't like that. It's okay. You don't have to watch the recording back, but you need to talk out loud. And there's something about when you hit that record button, you're like, oh, I'm on stage. I'm ready. I gotta, it's something about it. So I have gotten used to the sound of my voice. I'm not good yet with watching myself on video. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to see that. But I have gotten better about the sound of my voice. But record yourself, and I guarantee you, if you rehearse once, just once, you will find something to change about your presentation. You will find, oh, that didn't work, or oh, I need to tweak that a little bit. I always do it, even after all this time, I always rehearse. And then a second monitor is also your best friend. So I have a second monitor today. A lot of you I know use second monitors. If you don't have a second monitor, you have a couple options. They make these really cool portable monitors now. They're not too expensive on Amazon. You can get them, and there's just a USB, and it just plugs in, and it works right out of the box. It is great. And it's great if you don't have a lot of desk space or you're traveling. Big fan of those. But you might say to yourself, well, Rachel, I don't have a lot of money. I don't have $200 to just drop on a second monitor. Well, I'm going to tell you a little trick. Don't forget the thrift store. The thrift store has a lot of monitors, especially if you don't need a top of the line monitor. You'll be surprised. My husband went to the thrift store and found pretty much a brand new Asus monitor, name brand, $15 for a LCD monitor. Like, not, you don't even have to get a CRT anymore. So don't forget the thrift store, because people donate a lot of stuff because they don't need it anymore, and especially if you're just going to be using it sometimes. But it's a, oh, but a second monitor is good because you got your notes. I can have the chat in a separate screen. Another little side trick about Zoom is that I have the presentation view, so I can always see what you all see. So if I accidentally do show my email, as you can see, that's one of my fears, is showing my email accidentally. If I do show my email, I can see that on the screen. And I can also see when the screen loads. So second monitor, best friend.
Yeah, I was glad that you covered that second monitor. The whole time that you were talking about looking at the chat, I was thinking, yeah, I really need to get a second monitor.
Well, so you don't have, so for the chat, you don't have to get a second monitor. You just have to be okay with it blocking part of your screen. Now, the thing is, here I am on my screen. Hi, everybody, this is me. If I got a second monitor over here, I am briefly breaking eye contact. So I can read the chat, but I am briefly breaking eye contact. I don't really, it doesn't bother me, but some people might be bothered. So you can just keep the chat on the screen. And like for this presentation, I have been doing that because there's parts I can block out. But if you're doing like a software demonstration, it might be a little harder because you don't want to block out parts of the screen. So it's really up to you. But yeah, the chat, having the chat on the side of the screen is nice. Remember, you can also move the Zoom toolbar. So at the very top of the screen, which I don't know if everyone can see it when I'm presenting, but there's that toolbar that has screen share and chat and participants. You can move that. You can drag that to the second monitor. It doesn't have to stay at the top of your screen. So just a reminder, you can do that as well. So my spooky recap is don't be scared, be prepared. That's how you can avoid scariness, is being prepared. Remember to give people pumpkin to talk about. So give people engagement questions, poll questions, try to see where they're at, try to engage the audience. Sometimes they don't want to engage, but do your best, make an effort. And then cameras are optional, so you don't have to turn your camera on. Even if you're the presenter, I say it's okay. You can say Rachel said it's okay, and then I will take the criticism. Mostly you should have your camera on, but you don't always have to. So with that said, I want to know, are there any questions about anything that I've talked about or any sort of thing? I will let you type in the chat or come off mute if you like. But in the meantime, I will say I hope this was a treat. I have a really cool email that I think you all will appreciate. It is adverb@gmail.com. I have had that Gmail account since 2014. I'm never getting rid of it. And then my LinkedIn, also very easy. It's just adverb. So as you can see, you know what my favorite part of speech is. So I will say now, I will, with my last 5 minutes or 3 minutes, if you will, I will see if there's any questions or if that's all. Oh, I see Melissa raised her hand. Yes.
Hi. Thank you so much. This is very, very helpful, and I love the animations and graphics. Um, I don't know if okay, how to ask this. When you're presenting something that you have your camera off, for example, or that you really need to have them paying attention to the screen, what would you say is like the balance or fine line between like what is not enough to have on screen and what is too much? Like I'm working with a client right now on making a presentation and it's mostly audio based. So like that's something we're considering is like how do you keep it visually dynamic but not overloading them? Yeah.
Well, I'm a fan of as little text as possible. That's me personally,
Okay.
because the more text, the more they have to read. Now, are you talking about for presentations, or are you talking about for, you
It's
know,
a
when
pre-recorded kind of presentation. Yeah.
okay, so generally speaking, for me, when people say they don't like a lot of stuff on the screen, usually they mean text. So usually
Mhm.
we're okay with a lot of visuals, but it's the text that really bothers us. So I tend to err on the side of the less text, the better. And if you can have no text, that's even great. But you're also working with a pre-recorded video. So
Yeah.
sometimes clients know what they know best. So it is a struggle. But in my opinion, it's not so much about like here, I've got a bunch of stuff on the screen. For now, granted, it's my
Yeah.
ending slide, but it's not so distracting because there's not a lot of text. But if I had a lot of text here too, I think it would be too overwhelming and you wouldn't know what to focus on. So that's what I would say. I would say focus on how can we cut text, how can we summarize, how can we shorten things, and then maybe not worry so much about all the other elements. That's what I would start with first. So that's
Perfect.
my
That's really helpful. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you. Cool.
question. I appreciate raising your hand too. And like a physical raising it. I like that. So that was very nice. All right. Any other questions or comments? Anyone want to challenge me on my hot takes? They weren't they were medium takes. You know, I could have put more hot takes, but I wanted to keep it medium level spice.
Well, but what I love is that you have so much experience to draw from, right? You, we can't, we may argue if, uh, I loved how some of the responses to your poll was it depends because we're in a world of it depends, right? But I love how you're sharing your experience. You know, we may not agree that this is the best definitive answer, but no one can argue with your experience, right? You definitely have lots and lots of training chops, lots of hours in the saddle, and we're
I,
just so appreciative that you're willing to share your superpowers with
so
us.
I have one more secret, and Vicky knows the secret already. So Vicky, you can pretend to be surprised. So you might have all wondered, how did you design this really cool presentation? Where did these graphics come from? What this font? This was great. Well, my secret is I'm gonna pull back the curtain. My secret is it's all in Canva. So I made this presentation in Canva for free. There is a pro version of Canva, so don't pay. If you mean you can pay, you can pay if you want to. I don't want to knock on Canva, but this is completely free. So I selected this presentation. So I will just really quickly, if I go to the presentation here, I can just show you. Uh, it's all done for me. I just modified elements of it. I'm going to let you know in advance though. It makes a really cool presentation, but if you are a tweaker, if you're someone that likes to fine tune things, Canva's not made for that. It's going to frustrate you a little bit. So the one plus side is you get a great presentation with a bunch of fun Halloween characters and all this fun animation. The downside is that it's a little hard to tweak. But my other little tip, I'll show you. When you go to share over here, I do have the option to, and let me do this right here. So I do have the option, if I go to share in the upper right-hand corner here, I do have the option to go to download. And if I download it, so I click this right link right here, then I can download it as a PowerPoint. So you can export as a PowerPoint, but then you lose all the fun animation. Sometimes the fonts don't work right. So I was actually presenting this all in Canva. You didn't even know, you thought it was a PowerPoint. I tricked you. It was all in Canva. So that's my other little final trick of the night. And then I had to move my little bar out of the way. But there you go. There you go. So,
I
all right.
cannot believe that was Canva. I was like, if this was made in Canva, I swear, like that's crazy.
Yeah. And I do recommend Canva if you're sick of like the typical PowerPoint looks. I've just seen so many
Mhm.
PowerPoints and there's no way I could have I'm no graphic designer. I wouldn't be able to pull off this beautiful presentation, but
So yeah, it's beautiful.
somebody did the hard work for me. And then I will show one more thing, just a really quick thing. So here on Canva, if I want to add a slide, I would just click on the plus sign here, and then I would add it as a new page. And then one thing I didn't like was how some of these are white and some of these are black. And that's something you want to be kind of mindful of is I feel like it's jarring to move from a black background to a white background. So what I actually did was I made it a gradient. So if I come up here to do the background color, if I make it a black, I'm going to lose all those elements. So I don't want to do that. But if I do a linear gradient, it does that. And then all I have to do is just change the font here. I would have to change this to a white font. There you go. Bam. So easy peasy. Like I said, good for simple stuff, not so much for fine tuning. That's my little caveat. Anyway, that was all. So
this was awesome, Rachel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me stop my share and pass the baton.
Right. Well, first we have to have the thunderous applause.
Oh, that's right. Thunderous applause. Thank you. I don't
And
know
take a bow.
Oh, there
you go.
I'll take a boo. There we go. There's my little guy in my little shirt. So
So thank you, Rachel.